Our recent Voces is really focused on the family. Now, why do we pick the family as a topic of conversation for Raza Development Fund, which is obviously a community development financial institution? Part of it is, in the major mission of Raza Development Fund, is to touch the lives of Hispanic families across the country, especially as it relates to projects that obviously touch children through charter schools or charter school facilities, through health facilities, through a number of projects that are around affordable housing. But one has to ask themselves a question, okay, what is it that we as individuals have that is in common? Well, we all come from a family. Now, when we look at it from our vantage point as an organization, we try to look at where our families around the country, especially Hispanic families and poor families, that need the capital and services that we provide. And we also look at how an organization, whether it's a nonprofit and sometimes for-profit, although much more focused on affiliates from National Council La Raza, how are their projects going to touch the lives of children, the elderly, parents, community as a whole? So Voces this go around focused on the families and the impact that each one of us carries from our experiences with our parents, with our father, our mother, our grandmother, and aunt. One that touches our lives in a profound way. Because realistically, when you push everything aside, careers, whether you're wealthy, whether you're poor, whether you're well educated, whether you're minimally educated, whether you're an immigrant from Mexico or from Salvador or El Salvador or any other South American countries, the one thing that always is a part of us till we are at the end of our lives are our families. And it's an interesting concept to understand that our growth as individuals, our spiritual life, our sense of being as a person, who we are, as an example of growing up in South Phoenix. We came from a family, my father was a hard-working laborer. I mean, he worked in a utility company. So we lived in the poor part of town. Of course, during that period, I didn't feel of it as though it was a poor side of Phoenix. But one of the things that my father gave me early on in the understanding of who I was as a person, is he said, you need to know two things that you should always be proud of. First of all, he goes, you're an American. And that's very important for you to be respectful of that and be prideful of that. And second of all, you're Mexican. So you come from a culture, a language, a people that has a beautiful background, and we're part of this country. So you're a Mexican American. So always be proud of that. That stuck with me for my whole life. But also the knowledge, for instance, that we grew up next to railroad tracks in South Phoenix. And those railroad tracks obviously attracted individuals that were sometimes homeless. My mother always had a pot of beans and making fresh tortillas and salsa. And therefore, when someone would knock on our door, she would always send me out to give burritos, bean burritos, to whoever was at the door that needed food. Most of the time they were asking for work, and so she also knew that the dignity of that person was that they would earn something. So she'd put them to clean yard or do some work around the house. But ultimately it was for food. Well, that ingrained in me the service of serving the poor and serving those individuals that had less than we did, especially back in that era. So those pieces, that experience in the community that I grew up in my household, with my parents, obviously is part of forming me as an individual. So sometimes we forget in the hustle and bustle of building facilities or building charter schools or building health centers, that's a priority. Well, to some degree it is, because we steward capital into communities for these projects. And obviously they have to be run as a business, because at the end of the day we borrow money to put out. But ultimately it's charity, it's love of God, love of self, love of families. And obviously to love, you need to have experienced the compassion and the embrace of a family.